Hello and welcome to episode 1 of How Are You? I'm Marty, Smiley, your host of Pedestrian's newest podcast and video series talking all things youth mental health, sponsored by Kids Helpline. On our first episode, we're going to be talking about anxiety, and it's a really good place to start because it's the most common mental health condition in Australia. We headed out onto the streets with a microphone, stopped some pedestrians to ask, how common are mental health issues in your social group?
It's common, and I feel like a lot of people deal with that on a day-to-day basis, and you don't really know what the story is, if you get what I mean. But a lot of people struggle with little things, in this day and age.
Really, really prevalent is probably the best way to describe it.
I think they're sometimes drugs and alcohol can be a way to kind of deal with mental health issues, and it's obviously not the most appropriate way to be able to go through that process, but I guess we always try to find escapes, and mental health is we can't kind of escape it.
Absolutely. If you abuse those substances or drinking, it can impact your mental health. But I'm a believer in if you're able to control it and moderate your intake, generally your mental health will be in good shape.
For me, I find what's helped me most is self-reflecting. So if ever I'm going through something or if I'm struggling, reaching out as well is a really good thing that I've learnt myself, is to not isolate myself and to kind of go towards your friends and just talk about it. And then that helps you kind of understand why you're feeling those things as well.
Alright, now it is time for the check-in. My guest today is a musician I've admired for a long time. I grew up listening to the music he's made. His name is Adit Gauchan. He's one half of the hip-hop duo Horrorshow. I'm excited to chat to him today because normally he's behind the scenes, but I thought it was time to bring him forward to talk about something that a lot of artists struggle with. Welcome to the show, Adit.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So you're a musician, you're an artist. Is it kind of fitting that you've been brought in to do this episode about mental health, about anxiety?
I guess you're tapping into this idea that artists are often, afflicted with mental illness and anxiety, and it's one of the most
issues,
anxiety-prone professions sort of going around, given there's no stability of income and other various things.
How did the conversation go, in your household growing up about emotion, feelings, something you were experiencing, in school, issues you had? Could you come to your parents and talk about them openly?
Yeah, I definitely could, but there's a real sense of you kind of got to go through it on your own.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to rat my dad out here on a podcast with a camera filming, but we didn't have a relationship where he told me that he loved me.
Sure.
And I know people might be out there being like, "Oh my God, what? Your dad, never said that to you?" But it's like, nah, I knew he did, and and that's something that we're working on now. I definitely grew up with this sense that talking about your feelings and emotions, or talking about being sad, is actually you're showing weakness, and it's plain to see that it's anything but weak.
What did you have to learn to combat about your own mental health? Did you see certain pitfalls that you kept falling into? Did you have patterns that kept repeating in terms of your own mental health?
My peak party years was, in my mid-20s, 25 to 27, and I went pretty hard, and that was actually around the time when I really first started experiencing serious anxiety. And I've a clear memory of the first time that happened. We'd just thrown this huge party. We were kicking on back at the hotel, and I just kind of had a freak out of sorts. There were, and how it manifested itself was just me being in my head, being like, "Oh, what am I doing? Why am I here with these people? These people are my friends, but are they laughing at me? What's going on? It was just this train wreck of anxious thoughts.
definitely, like, you could take yourself out of a social gathering almost and
Yeah.
look at it from a zoomed out perspective.
Yeah.
Why am I here? What am I doing with my life if this is what I'm...
Exactly. And those questions never lead anywhere good.
No.
You know?
Sometimes you follow a thought right down into the rabbit hole. You get down to the bottom of the rabbit hole and you're like, why did I follow this all the way there? This is so far from the present moment. Your new album, New Normal, it was a difficult album for you guys to make, or what was happening in the time between your last album? You had a lot of things that challenged you both. What were some of those things?
I think creatively it made sense to make this album because it's what we were living at the time. Both Solo and I were going through it at the same time, and someone very close to him fell very sick and was diagnosed with cancer, and he stepped into this sort of, carer mode. And then soon after, my younger brother was diagnosed with cancer as well. So that was like a huge kind of double blow, and something that really uprooted any kind of normality in our lives, as if it was, normal to begin with. But it felt natural to kind of document that and the process and kind of the emotions and what we went through during that time.
He passed away?
He passed away. He lost his battle at the beginning of this year on January 5. We found that news out towards the end of last year. I think it was around September, October. So we had a few months to kind of process it and make sense of it. But we drew a lot of inspiration from Osim and how he handled it, and
His strength or resilience. Or
exactly. Just seeing him kind of meet every challenge, with complete intent and no sense of backing down. It was a very difficult thing to witness, but also a very beautiful thing to witness. And my family drew a lot of strength from that.
I suppose it's quite hard to work out what you do when the end does come for a family member, a loved one, someone close to you. How did you process the grief and afterwards?
Something that we do in our culture. Every culture has their own rituals and various things that they might observe. But something that my family did that was very helpful and quite beautiful was this period of mourning, more of a drawn out period of mourning. We all stayed under the same roof, and we fasted for 2 weeks. No salt, no garlic, basically depriving yourself of things that were that would give you pleasure.
Yep.
And that, and together with that, we meditated together on occasion, and we were just there. My mum actually took something 3 months off, but very much a distinct, clear set period of time where we didn't really do much. My mum didn't even step outside the house for something for 49 days. So it really was about being in that moment, experiencing it to its sort of fullness, feeling the pain, feeling the sadness, and trying to find the beautiful things in that, which all of that came from this sense that we really loved the love that we have for my brother and the love that he had for us and the connection that we shared.
What are some of the things that you do to alleviate anxiety?
Listening to music that you love, and sometimes do it very, very loudly. Turn that shits up.
Turn it up.
Exercise for sure. catching up with your parents, that may not work for all people.
That comes with a caveat.
Drinking tea, taking a bath, like those sorts of things. There's so many things you can do.
That's a good list. Hey, thank you so much for catching up with me today.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, now it is time for our segment On the Line with our Kids Helpline expert, Josie. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, your role on this show is basically to give us an insight into the counselling side of what you do. You basically speak to this youth of Australia, and you have done for over 2 years.
Yeah.
Where does anxiety sit in sort of the top 10 list of the calls you get?
It sits really high.
Surely like one
Really
or two,
high.
right?
Yeah. And I think it sits particularly high because although not every young person that we speak to has diagnosed anxiety or a mental health condition, when you really unpack anxiety, anxious thoughts, anxious feelings, it's stress, right? It's concern or distress or stress related to something that's happening. And that usually is the motivation for someone picking up the phone or jumping on web chat to us.
For someone who is a friend of someone who is experiencing anxiety, what's the first thing that they should say to someone when they're saying, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm restless, I'm doing this, that, and the other?
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond first up when you're sitting there at the desk and you get those kind of calls?
Best thing, absolute best thing, whether you're a professional, whether you're a support person, whether you're a family member, is just to say, tell me about it. Let's hear about it. Like, hey, it's just us here. What do you need? I think that's the most powerful question really in anything when we're looking after someone, caring for someone's mental health is what's going on and what do you need?
What about just noticing anxiety in others?
You know, often, unfortunately, we put the onus on other people to bring up with us if they're not feeling okay. But often, particularly anxious people might be really concerned about how to do that or how they'll be perceived. Will I be judged? So if you notice that someone's not feeling quite right, or maybe they're acting a little different, or they seem a little wound up or a little not themselves, just saying, hey, how you going? Or pointing out, I've noticed a few things recently. Are you feeling all right? And then allowing them to pick and choose what they want to bring up from there is really good.
What are some things you suggest to people on the line when it comes to anxiety?
It's really thinking about what is anxiety for you? How do you experience it? What does it do? And then once you understand it, you know how to combat it, right? So for some people, anxiety is going to make them really tense, really on edge. For some people, it plummets them down and sort of locks them in their body. For some people, it makes them really manic or really energetic or trying to shift this stress out of them in any way. So those are really different ends of the spectrum, right? But it's understanding what is healthy stress, what's manageable stress, and when does it reach a point where you need to look after yourself and to seek some support as well.
How can someone know when they've got it or when they're experiencing it?
Everyone will experience some form of, anxious thought and feeling throughout everyday life. I guess the point at which you might need to think about getting extra support, reaching out, is the point at which it might impede you from doing something, or it might be shutting down other parts of your life as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Josie. You got to get back to your desk at Kids Helpline. If you wanted to find out more about any of the topics that we've covered on today's show, you can head to kidshelpline.com.au or contact them on 1800 55 1800 or via web chat. They're there too. Next week, we are going to be discussing sexual health. We're going to be talking about XEX. It's an important topic, and I know you're probably going to want to listen. See ya. If you do want to hear about all the other podcasts that Pedestrian is doing, they have the Pedestrian Podcast Network. You can get it. You got to subscribe to it on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify, or where all other podcasts, all the good ones, are found.